Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. In this video I'm repotting two Paphoipedilums, and for a change I'm potting two Paphoipedilums that have got some roots. There was a period when I was repotting stumps. I think I've got my head round them now. Anyway, I've been working hard today, so I've earned that. The first one is Paphoipedilum mordiae. I think that's a primary cross, but it's certainly not a species anyway. It is a hybrid. And this has got two old fans, two new fans, one of which I've just taken the flower off because it's just finished there, and the other new growth hasn't bloomed yet, but it still may well do that. We'll just have to wait and see, basically. The two old fans, this one's looking a bit sorry for itself, but the other one's not too bad. So I'd say there's three good fans on there, and what I consider to be a pretty good root system for a Paphoipedilum. It's the best root system I've ever had anyway. So anyway, the mix I'm using is small seedling bark with some perlite, large perlite, and some broken up sphagnum moss. And the reason I break my sphagnum moss up is it distributes itself more evenly through the mix. The long strands can get sort of hooked up and bunched together a bit, so the smaller the pieces of sphagnum, the more evenly it mixes. These are plants that obviously don't like to dry out for anything but the shortest length of time. They are an evenly moist type of orchid. And what they don't like is their media breaking down. You'll knock your roots off faster than anything if you do that. I can't say across the board because it's not true, but a lot of Paphoipedilums come from quite alkaline areas compared with most other orchids that are normally slightly on the acidic side. So obviously if you've got an organic medium, eventually it's going to start to break down, and when it does that it turns quite acidic quite quickly, and that will knock your roots off quicker than anything if it's one of those Paph types. As I said, there are some Paphs that grow on the forest floor, you know, in leaf litter. Well, I doubt if that's alkaline, but you know, when you've got the hybrids you have to play the guessing game. Which one have we got? Anyway, I tend to err on the side of caution, and I don't leave mine in their pots anymore like I used to. I used to be frightened of repotting the flipping things. And quite honestly, these things actually seem to respond to being repotted by chucking out more roots and not losing the old ones, which is the important bit. Because if you can maintain the root system and keep them in fresh media, you're less likely to have the old fans die off on you, and then you end up building up a much larger, stronger plant. If the old fans keep dying off on you, you end up with what I've had over the years, a single fan Paphoipedilum, which has just got no strength in it. It may well bloom, but it's just not building itself up into a nice big strong plant because it's forever losing its oldest growths. I'm not pressing this down hard, I'm just teasing it because that was quite an extensive root system, and I don't want any air gaps on this one. I want this media to be touching all of the roots. I don't want any bare roots in this pot anywhere. I also want the plant roughly in the middle because I haven't got a clue when the next set of new growths are going to come out yet. It fooled me last time and pushed a new growth right up the middle of the plant. You normally expect it to come up around the edge, but it didn't. That's the one that's just bloomed. Now I looked at this root system, and some of the roots on this plant have branched, so it is capable of branching. So if it did lose a root tip, it could actually shoot out farther back in theory. I wouldn't recommend breaking your roots on Paphoipedilums. It's not the best of ideas. But the one thing I do need is that the base of the plant is in contact with the media. But what I want to do is make sure that that media has got extra moss in it. So I'm just going to add a bit more moss now. I want the base of the plant to be airy but moist, and it'll encourage the new roots to come out, and when they do come out they get straight into moisture and then they will head down into the pot. If they come out in the air, they are very likely to just dry up and die. You know, you end up with a little stump sticking out with no root tip on it, and it never grows. It just sits there laughing at you. So it's much better to make sure the base of the plant has got something around it, not packed in tight. You could encourage rot around the base of the plant, but just enough loose media with moisture to get those new roots into something. So that's what I'm going to attempt to do now, is just with this extra, I'm only placing this, that certainly isn't going to get pressed down. I'm just loosely placing it around the top of the plant, and that's where it will sit. There's obviously a lot of air in there, so but that's a mistake I've made many times in the past. I've been trying to grow these flipping things for years, and quite honestly it's just literally since the start of last year I've suddenly started getting plants that are not losing their roots, and a lot of it is geared up to just an extra bit of knowledge. You know, make sure the plant isn't planted too deep, but make sure it's deep enough that the new roots have got something to get straight into, which is what I've done there. So basically, the way I sort of look at it is at the base of the plant there's sort of brown coloured sheaths protecting the base of that plant. When I finish potting I don't want to see them and that to me says it's about the right level, but that top layer does need to be loose and not packed in, so that there's some room for some air. So that's that one done. Yeah. Got moisture around the base of the plant, no air gaps in the pot that I can see. A good watering now will settle that in nicely, and if when I'm settling this in, do you know, I've just seen a new growth right in the middle of the plant. Maybe, we'll wait and see. If after watering this that media starts to drop down a bit and exposes the base of the plant where the roots are going to come out, then I'll add some more, and I might, you know, that might be in 2 months' time, but if I see the media receding from the base of the plant, I'll top it up. That needs to be kept up around the base of the plant. Right, so we haven't got enough there to do the other one, even though it's not a very big plant, so we'll mix up a little bit more. Whoa! That plant's very unsteady, I'll take it out of the pot. Believe it or not, although that doesn't look like a bad root system, there's actually only 2 roots there. And you can see where some have died. My fault probably, too high in the pot. But that's one root, and this is the other one with a branch. So it's only got 2 roots, but they're not bad roots, they're both good, firm, fleshy roots. So I'll just put a bit of this sponge rock in here. If you use this stuff, for goodness sake, don't breathe it in. It's an inert media that basically cannot break down. Doesn't matter what you do to it. So if you think about if that dust gets in your lungs, I'd like you to tell me how it's going to get out again, because it doesn't break down. So don't breathe it in, please. It's quite dangerous stuff, especially if you're somebody with breathing difficulties anyway. The last thing you want is this stuff hanging on the edge of your lungs forever, because if it goes in there, that's probably what's going to happen. So it goes steady with the dust. You can see I'm leaning right back. I'm making sure that it's heavy dust actually. It's not like it floats around in clouds. But nonetheless, I do not want that anywhere near my mouth or my nose. And once it's mixed in with the media, the fact that there's some damp moss in there, it settles the dust down. And then if you worry about things like a bit of dust in your media, if you flush your pot really well, it'll all come out the bottom and then it's gone. And once it's gone, it's gone. A bit more moss in there. And my moss is soaking wet, but I always squeeze the water out first and then I tear it up into small pieces. and I've explained why. The great big long strandy pieces can end up, you know, all in one place, and other parts of the media haven't really got any moss, so you've got dry patches and wet patches. And we don't want wet patches, do we? I know that's boring video watching me tearing up moss, but it was silly to stop it and start again for such a small amount. Right, so that should be more than enough. Yep, possibly even a little bit heavy on the moss this time, but not to worry. You have to bear in mind that my Paphoipedilums are not going to stay in the pot long enough for the media to break down, so even if there is a little bit more moss than I might like, and it does start to break down, it's not going to be in there long enough to do any harm. That is not ever happening again. That's why I keep notes on repotting dates and things like that. Quite honestly, if you want to, you can repot these flipping things every year, as long as you're careful and don't damage the roots. Because these roots are big, strong, strappy things, but they can snap quite easy. So what we've got here is a very old fan that bloomed, last year's fan that bloomed, that's only got 2 leaves, and this year's fan that's just finished blooming, that managed to put up 3 leaves. But this seems to bloom quite happily on a fan with very few leaves, which is good, because it hasn't got many. It's no good wanting what you can't have. Now this one is an air cone pot, so again a bit of chunky stuff in the bottom to allow that airflow. Followed up by media, so if any roots do get down in the bottom of the pot, they've got something sensible to get into. And this one was sat far too high in the pot. The reason is there. I had to try and get what was a single root into the pot, and it was touching the bottom of the pot and pushing the plant out. So I've gone for a slightly larger pot this time, and this root has accommodated me very nicely by managing to bend round. So now I can get that down in the pot without breaking the roots. The most important bit of this plant is here, at the base of the latest growth, because that is highly likely where the next growth's going to come out, and any new roots that it decides to give me the pleasure of. Now, luckily with so few roots, obviously as I tip this in it just goes everywhere. There aren't going to be any air gaps this time, but I'm keeping the plant slightly off centre simply because the next new growth will then be right in the centre of the plant. No vicious pressing down, just a gentle prod, and quite honestly that's settled that in quite nicely, and luckily that is just about at the right height. So a little bit of pressure on the stuff that's already in there, followed by a little bit round the base of the plant with some extra moss, same as the last one. So all it's for is to just make sure the base of the plant doesn't get dry and roots come out into something sensible straight away. No heading off through the air like the old cattleyas do. Straight down in the media, please. And keep a nice active growing root tip until the root goes round the pot about 3 times. It doesn't hurt the roots to go round the pot. It's not a big deal. If they go straight down, fair enough, but some of these roots can get very long, and if the roots do go straight down, the chances are they'll come back up the side again. And I don't know how deep a pot you'd have to stop that happening, but my problem with really deep pots is they stay wet at the bottom, and that does more harm than possibly accommodating some plunging roots. So now I know when I water that's going to settle away from the base, so I'm just going to push that down a bit more mossy stuff just around the base, only loose. That's the bit I don't press down. I just gently place it. Can I see any sheaths? No. So that's just about the right level, yeah? Because the roots will come out from behind those sheaths. They won't come out from above, so they can now come straight out and straight into the media. Another good watering on that one, and this one is Paphoipedilum Magical Venus. I have got a good memory, haven't I? Because it's only just finished blooming, so that was filmed relatively recently. The bloom on that did not last long. It did not like being in the house in the dry air. So, well, there's your answer then, mate. Bloom at a different time of year next year. So that's those two Paphoipedilums. That's the mix I use. Others use different mixes, I'm sure. Some people may leave out the moss. Some people would be possibly much heavier on the moss even. I've seen those planted in those open mesh baskets, but in those circumstances I would think that the person would be heavier on the moss, because obviously if the whole of the sides of the pot and the bottom of the pot were completely open, boy is that going to dry fast. And you know, as I've said, these things don't like to dry out for anything but the shortest amount of time. It won't kill them. If the media totally dries out for a short period, they won't die as long as you get them wet again pretty quick. But leave them for long periods and they're going to go down. So evenly moist all the time is what's recommended and impossible to achieve. Because if you think about it, as it starts to dry, oh, I need to keep it evenly moist, so I'll water it. Well, now it's soaking wet, isn't it? So it's not evenly moist anymore. Just basically as they get towards dry, then give them another watering. And if you're going to water them. Don't pussyfoot around dribbling around the sides. Get on and water them. And they should do well. They don't like these types, the mottled leaves types. It's said in the main are more warmer growers than the plain leaf ones, but Paphoipedilums are an awkward bunch because if you generalise, you will get some wrong. There are some of the plain leaved green ones, the plain green ones, that actually love the heat, and there are some that like to be quite cool, and there are some of the mottled leaf ones that don't like getting too warm. So, you know, takes your chance, but they're worth it. I mean, I wouldn't keep the plain green leaf ones myself personally because I find them a boring plant. Nonetheless, the blooms are stunning, but to wait for the big gap between the blooms on the sort of size plants I've got, the mottled leaves means they can stay. The plain green ones, I'd keep looking at them and thinking, you're taking up shelf space, mate, and no blooms. Anyway, that's a couple of Paphoipedilums done. The other few that I've got weren't done that long ago, so those are the only two on the list, and they're now not on the list. I like that.